How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Ganji. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Guys, today we're going to talk about grooming and runaways. And this is related to some extent to the d4vd case or the David case. We want to discuss about the hidden manipulation behind the headlines. And I think it's a good time to discuss it because grooming is definitely part of the forefront of this case. He was around 17 when they first met on the online. She would have been around 12 or 13. And then when they probably made contact, actual physical contact could have been when he was around 18 and she was around 13 or 14. So what I want to do is today I want to focus on grooming, why it's in the forefront of everyone's mind. I think this will be something that will be a good dialogue for me and Russ to explore. So I do have Russ as my guest. Just bear with me though. I'm sure by now you guys are familiar with this case. That is d4d David. And to the right of him is Celeste Rivas Hernandez. To keep this intro a bit short, she, unfortunately, her body was found in his Tesla, and that was back on September 8th. That's a day after her 15th birthday. And as this case unfolds, they are finding out many disturbing things, including the fact that he could have been grooming her and that this relationship is both immoral and illegal. And if you guys really want some more details, we have covered this from so many different angles. Feel free to check out my other videos, and usually they relate to the latest updates. As of right now, there are no late updates, at least something that I feel we didn't already pick up on. So now I want to explore grooming in itself. Let me get Russ. What up, Russ?
Good morning, Anthony. How goes it?
Good. Hey, Russ, you mind introducing yourself, please?
Sure. My name is Russ Hamilton. I'm a former and now retired sergeant from California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. I am also a former senior juvenile correctional officer. I currently work for a private company where we do re-entry and rehabilitation work through a local county probation department and a local county jail where I am a case manager. I am also the author of Keepers of Chaos, not Keepers of Chaos, I'm also the founder of Keepers of Chaos, which is, it's very early in the morning here, which is dedicated to mentorship, training, history, content, and everything else as it relates to corrections for those people who actually serve in the field, be they officers or be they free staff. I am also a brand new author. I have a book out, which is called Killing Complacency, Tactical Awareness for Correctional Professionals. And I'm very proud of this. I think it's a book that actually has the potential to perhaps even save a life.
And that's why we write this stuff. And guys, if you get a chance to, I have two books that I think you'll find interesting. Inmate Manipulation Decoded. It details how manipulation occurs. And it doesn't only apply to the prison setting. It also applies to real world and also breaking boundaries, basically the building of undue relationships between staff and inmates. All right. So real quick, Russ, let's just get right to the beginning. I got about 14 questions coming your way, Russ. And I don't have an excuse because it's not that early by me. So why is grooming in the spotlight? So the d4d case or David case, let me show you guys a picture of him again. There he is. And let me show you a picture of the girl. That's Celeste Rivas Hernandez. And again, she was found in the trunk of this Tesla right here in the frunk. Sorry, the frunk. All right. So the David case has ripped open a conversation about grooming that goes far beyond one tragedy. We're not just talking about sexual predators anymore. We're talking about a sophisticated system of psychological manipulation that destroys young lives. What makes this even more complex is the intersection with runaway cases. I wanted to put that in because Celeste is a chronic runaway. Statistics show that within 48 hours of leaving home, vulnerable youths are targeted by predators who exploit their desperation for safety, understanding, or basic survival needs. So in many cases, grooming is the reason kids run away. Now, granted, guys, a lot of people are saying or starting to run with this thing that because she's a chronic runaway, that she must have came from a bad family. I disagree with that. Children or young teenage girls, they they could have many reasons why they decide to run away. But when you look at the research, a lot of them are running away because they believe they are running towards something. So for someone like David to take advantage of that, what he can do is entice them to run towards him while also trying to motivate her to run away from a family that can treat her better. And usually on something superficial. Hey, Celeste, would you like to go to my concert? No, my parents won't let me. Oh, really? Well, they must be horrible parents. You got to get away from them immediately. And next thing you know, they start running away for very superficial reasons. So again, in many cases, grooming is the reason kids run away. Predators spend months planting seeds. Your parents don't understand you. You'd be happier with me. Run away and I'll take care of you. The child thinks they're escaping to love and freedom, but they're actually running straight into a trap that was carefully set for them. So first question, Russ, why do you think society still doesn't grasp that grooming can actually be the driving force behind a child's decision to run away, not just something that happens after they leave?
I think it's because the grooming part of it, happens in a place where no one is actually observing it. So it begins with when people are assessing what actually happened here, they don't see that part of it, and they usually lack the empathy to understand what was going on. When you take an initial overview of this case, and you only hear about it and you don't understand some of the parameters about it. Let me give you, for instance, here. This guy at the beginning of this was relatively young, and so everyone thinks about this typically as typical young love type of scenario. When in actuality, this guy was very sophisticated already in the types of things that he was doing. I mean, look, he has a car, he has a business, he's well known, and so all of those things are potential lures to someone who is not nearly as sophisticated, doesn't have that worldly assessment kind of vision of looking at things, and so makes them into a potential target.
Yeah, and guys, this is a psychological game, and sometimes it's not easy to be seen because it's done in secrecy. Because I'll guarantee you, once they're able to get some level of control over their target or over their victim, there's some level of secrecy. So it's very hard for the family to actually figure out what it is that they're doing. And even if we say, well, you got to monitor their iPads and monitor their phones, they find other ways to communicate that's more covert. I mean, me and Russ could tell you, in the prison system, once you lock down on one avenue of contraband, another avenue gets discovered. They basically, they're very, they know how to adapt and adjust. And also with people like this, they find interests that are similar to the children. That's what they do. That's what they study. So their way to navigate themselves to your child is extremely sophisticated because they understand the needs of the child, because that's what or the wants of the child, sorry, because that's what they are studying. They are pure experts at that. And then Russ, when high profile cases like David hit the news, do you think we're finally having the right conversation, or are we still missing the deeper manipulation tactics that lead kids to voluntarily leave home?
In my opinion, and I'm very biased about it, though, of course, is that the journalism focuses on the sensationalism of it all, and they focus on getting hits or getting clicks, and pumping up things in ways, and I don't think that they're really very interested in doing anything but that. I think that's why it's good to put out a perspective of people like you and I who really have worked around these individuals, and this is something that it's not just about runaways, although typically we think about grooming happening with a younger subset of people, but that grooming also happens even to older adult, and generally not, I shouldn't say older, but older than teens, females and males. And so I think it's something that people just typically are not aware of. And this is just, one small instance. If you go back and, want to read some things that are, like really, truly horrific, go back and look at some of the stuff that was going on and has been going on, for instance, in the UK since about 2014, where they had these, grooming gangs. And they don't want to acknowledge the problem at all. And they just kind of more or less sloughed it off.
Yeah, and guys, grooming doesn't always have to lead to sexual exploitation. It can lead to anything where the other party is in control of that individual. You'll see grooming in corrections where Russ said male or female. Yeah, it doesn't always have to be within the confines of we're going to have sex. No, it could be just in the confines of bringing in contraband and literally taking control of that individual. And then there's one more thing I wanted to cover here. When high-profile case like David hit the news, do you think we finally have in the right cover? Okay, so wait, I want to reiterate something. Russ, you hit on something so spot on, the sensationalism. Guys, the news is going to cover whatever they got to cover, right? They're going to take some little inch of something that could be an update, a very small thing, and then run rampant with it as if it's the biggest thing in the world. And then they create all these sensationalized perspectives that people start buying into, and then you wind up shifting away from what we really should be focusing on, because in the end they're going for the views and whatnot. We're trying to figure out what can we take advantage of in the moment that can create a bigger spotlight on things that we haven't looked at for a while. Like about a week ago, we did something on hot car deaths. Now we're doing something on, as I said, grooming. This stuff matters because in the process of this whole case, now you have grooming being brought into the spotlight. And something about us in corrections is corrections operates in the shadows. So usually we have to connect to trending stories to start pushing our concerns. No different here. Grooming is now in the spotlight. We have to do what we can to try to keep this in the spotlight because, this is where change happens. You see it in Emmanuel Harrow's case, an abused child where there really was nothing to protect a child really from being abused from an experienced child abuser. So people are talking about doing registrations for child abusers, no different than sex offenders. And these are the kind of dialogues that we should be that should be happening because when these concerns are now in the spotlight. So now I got the next part, Russ, which is what grooming really is. So let me just go ahead and I forgot to write this one in. What grooming really is. Forgot to put that in for some reason. All right, so grooming isn't a single act. It's a calculated psychological campaign that can take weeks, months, or even years. The 6-stage process is going to be targeting, trust building, isolation, dependency creation, sexualization at some point. But as I said, I don't think that's always the case. That's that it could just be any type of control that brings about full ownership of that individual. And then the control maintenance, which would be about maintaining that control in the long run. I think sexualization, to be honest with you, is a level of control over that individual. I mean, ultimate control over that individual. So it's like a master class in manipulation. But here's what most people miss for runaways. The process often begins with survival grooming. A predator doesn't start with come have sex with me. And guys, I'm doing this in the context of the Celeste Rivas case. A predator doesn't start with come have sex with me. They start with, I see you're struggling at home. I understand you. Your parents are toxic. You deserve better. They offer practical solutions like I have a place for you that you can stay at. I'll help you get on your feet. You can trust me when no one else cares. By the time the child realizes what's happening, they're already dependent, isolated, and convinced that going back home isn't an option. The most insidious part, the groomer often convinces the child that running away was their idea. You're so mature for your age. You're ready for independence. Your family is holding you back. The child feels empowered making this choice, not realizing they've been psychologically maneuvered into it. So first question of 2 here for us is, hey, Russ, can you break down how grooming specifically works to convince a child that running away is their own empowered decisions when it's actually the predator's end game?
Yeah, it's pretty simple, really. If you look at what they do is basically, they set up a psychological feed that's predicated on that individual's, confirmation biases, and so it's kind of just a closed loop. When you say things like, you're really mature, and that person wants to feel really mature, and they completely aren't, and yet they buy into that feed loop because confirmation bias is a very real thing within the human psyche, and it's just constantly shoveling the coal to that and letting that fuel build and putting that person into a place of false confidence about the situation that they're in, and by that time they've already completely lost control. So that's that is the number one thing. But you see this across the board, because like here, you're talking about runaways mostly, but you can expand it to a lot of other things. Indoctrination into cults comes to mind first of all. I think about all of the runners who were predominantly female with regards to the gangs, and they get caught up so much in that gang culture that they'll do anything for the gang, and yet they are a sacrificial asset. The gang really doesn't care. They will just use them up, and then when it's time for them to go to prison on their own, they're just completely forgotten. And so there's a lot of things that this applies to in all of these subculture subsets, if you will.
Yeah, and as I said, guys, the reason why I wanted to make this a focus is because we went from grooming to now giving her a reason to run away. And it's crazy, because what we don't realize is when you're trying to provide reason for this repeated chronic runaway to run away, then you're kind of leaning towards excuses towards the individual who broke the law, who violated this young girl, who violated a position of trust that all celebrities should understand that they're given, which is the scariest thing in the world, but it's true. And sometimes they violate that high level of trust that people automatically give them because they're a celebrity. Very superficial, but it is true. But having said that, the dialogue has started to shift from grooming to why she's running away. And to be honest with you, outside of the, I would love to know what's going on with the family. Don't get me wrong, but it's not meant to minimize his role in it, because you also have to remember a kid that's becoming a teenager. I have one right now. A no on things that they should be getting no to makes the parent the enemy. Anything right now that little girl could be convinced to run away from, because if they don't get their way, a lot of these little girls think they're more mature than they really are. And who is mommy to tell me no? Or who is daddy to tell me no? Like, what do you mean I can't go to the concert? I'm 13. I know how to watch out for you want to go to a concert by yourself with a grown man, and mommy and daddy say no. And then all of a sudden she gets angry. And what the groomers do is they feed into that. And they make the parents look like they're bad guys for doing what any other parent would do. And the other steps here, just real quick, just to reiterate. So the target for her came during the internet chats. We're already aware of that. So, she probably became a target because she could have been chasing him at 13. And then unfortunately he fed into it instead of being an adult. And then he builds some level of trust, usually by taking advantage of her perspective and looking like he's siding with her. But the best way to build trust is to have a common enemy. So how can I build trust with her? I got to make it sound like, it's me and her versus another enemy. So who becomes the other enemy could be the family for, putting rules in play. And then you got the isolation. That's very key, because you don't want to have any chance of counter influence. Russ said it perfectly. The Colts isolate everyone, because the moment there's a counter influence, it messes their whole game up. So you got to make sure that I have that person under my control at all times. And then you got the dependency creation. Hey, come to my house. You know, don't worry, it's not that scary for you to run away because you're not running into the unknown. I got you. You know, you need money. I got you. You need a place to stay. I got you. So that eliminates a big level of ambiguity for a young child who's thinking like, well, if I run away, you know, who's going to take care of me? Who's going to, you know, help me make it through? And that this person knows I'm going to go ahead and do that. And that eliminates a lot of the ambiguity of fear of running away. And then you got the sexualization in this case here, which is to me the ultimate level of ownership of where that person is now vulnerable and you take complete ownership of that individual. But again, I put sexualization here, but it is really about ultimate control. Grooming is about ultimate control. And then it's the control maintenance. And here's the funny thing about the control maintenance. She was a repeated runaway, and they believe a lot of the times she was running to him and then going back home and then running to him and then going back home and then finally running off and never coming back. That is a perfect sign of control maintenance. Because no matter what, even if she was out of sight of his, he still had the ability to call her back whenever needed. And the second question, or wherever he wanted, sorry. And the second question of that section, Russ, is why is the dependency stage so crucial in grooming? And how do predators use a child's basic survival needs? That's what I added here because she's a runaway. Food, shelter, safety as weapons of control.
You know, if you're the sole provider of those things, you know, that are in regards to, you know, both safety and survival, by isolating the victim from everyone else, you isolate her from her family. You make her think that, you know, you overblow things like perhaps, for instance, you know, the cops are going to be looking for you. Try and make sure that, you know, her friends are a threat. Oh, your friends, you know, they might tell your parents. And then, you know, you try and capitalize on that so that you are the monopoly for both the wants and the needs. And then that puts that person into a person of complete dependency. And it's really as simple as that.
And I love how you put the friends in. I also want to mention something else too. The dependency can also play into obligation. You know, I'm giving you all these things. Now you owe me. And it's subtle. It may not be said directly like that, but it could make it conflicted if the child wants to report something and then will constantly think, well, what did they do? All the stuff that they did for me when, you know, they were taking care of me, you know, so it makes it a bit difficult because I'll guarantee you if there's ever a sense of control that I guess the groomer, maybe in this case, David feels that he's losing, the first thing he's going to exploit will be what he's done for her before he even crosses the bridge of being aggressive and threatful. I think the first thing they'll try to say is, hey, what I've done for you? You know, your parents treated you like shit. Your parents gave you a curfew, probably. Your parents gave you rules. But the point is, your parent, he's going to twist that into your parents treated you like shit, and I was there for you. And now you're going to go ahead.
It's just classic guilt tripping, but at a much more intense level.
Right. And then the next part I got is the modern grooming tactics. Now this is why it's good to have this dialogue coming to the forefront because, you know, grooming has changed. You got the use of the internet now, which freaking exponentially grows the reach of these predators. So social media has weaponized grooming in ways we're still trying to understand. Platforms like Discord, Snapchat, and TikTok create perfect hunting grounds because they offer direct access, disappearing messages, and the illusion of privacy. But the real game changer is parasocial relationships when fans develop one-sided emotional connections with influencers, celebrities, or content creators. Because to be honest with you, if you think about it, he may have became an artist eventually, but he was originally an influencer on a social platform. And believe it or not, a lot of influencers take advantage of that, pose as they're going to be mentors and whatnot, and then wind up taking advantage of the vulnerable. So a 13-year-old girl feels like she knows a musician because she followed their content for months. When that person slides into their DMs, it doesn't feel like a stranger approaching. It feels like someone she already has a relationship with reaching out personally. The normal stranger danger alarms don't sound because this feels like a friend or even someone she's attached to finally noticing her. For runaways, predators have adapted their tactics to both online and physical spaces. They monitor hashtags like hashtag runaway, hashtag homeless, hashtag need help. They lurk in bus stations, outside shelters, near schools. They learned that desperate kids will respond to immediate offers of help. Hey, you look lost. Need a place to crash? Hey, I've been where you are. And again, he had that because his music is what a young teenage girl connects to. Isolation, secrecy. I mean, he shared the same thoughts that I'm sure most young girls are feeling at that age, even young boys. The most dangerous evolution, predators now use grooming to manufacture runaways. I wanted to add that because everybody was looking at, wow, she ran away and she must have ran away from a troubled home. No, I want to put this out there again. The most dangerous evolution, predators now use grooming to manufacture runaways. They don't wait for kids to leave home. They systematically destroy the child's relationship with their family through manipulation, then position themselves as the only viable alternative. Russ, one of two questions for this section. How have parasocial relationships created a new vulnerability that predators exploit? And why don't kids recognize the danger when someone they know from social media contacts them privately?
There's just so much, opportunity from those types of settings that allow things to happen outside the presence of the parents, where these things are first seeded, and that's what the whole grooming thing is. And parents would be wrong to think, that it only applies to, Facebook or Discord or things like that. If any of you want a real true eye-opening experience on the level of this, I'm just going to give you two words to Google, and that's grooming and Roblox. And I'll let you take it from there. Google that and then see what's really going on, and about how it doesn't have to be that type of social platform for grooming to occur.
Yeah, and it's funny because back in the day, the parents would not want their kids on AOL Messenger, all this stuff, and social media platforms. So what does the predator do? The predator hops on things that they know kids enjoy, like video gaming, online connection, like Roblox, Minecraft, Fortnite. And this is their evolution. This is where they knew that it would be harder for parents to check. Because honestly, you could put your kids in private rooms. They still find a way to get into connection with your kids. So having said that, it just shows you the evolution from chat-based things where you used to tell your kids not to do it to now video gaming. And the other thing I wanted to mention here with celebrities is there is an infatuation of the individual where the child unfortunately connects with the idea of who this musician is based on what their brand is, what they market. But then eventually who they are starts to surface, and the brand starts to wear thin. And by then it could be too late. So for any kid that's watching it, you don't really know the person. I don't care what they show you behind the scenes, those little private conversations. No, you don't really know who that person is, because at all times that person is showcasing a brand. When you really want to find out who that person is, it's when the cameras aren't on and the brand starts to wear thin. That's something that me and Russ are very good with, because in prisons, inmates are very performative. And when the cameras are on or the right people are listening, they perform. But as any CO who watches those inmates 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, the mask falls off. And you no longer see the performative the performative individual. You see who they really are. So I say, for people that are celebrities, and for kids, if you're watching this, it's a brand that you connect to. And then eventually the brand wears off, and then you have the true individual. And then Russ, this is a unique question, Russ. I wanted to ask this. Now, obviously they're both dangerous, but what's more dangerous? Predators who target kids after they've already run away, or predators who actively groom kids to run away in the first place? You're muted, Russ. Sorry about that.
I think it's largely the former. Because you got to understand is that it's a saturation targeting kind of thing. A lot of these individuals, they're not targeting one single individual because that takes a lot of effort, and you never know if it's going to bear fruit. So what they do is they have multiple targets that they're going for all at the same time, and it's kind of a thing where if one doesn't pan out, another one will. This is especially true as it relates potentially to human trafficking. So I think that the one that's already in the pipeline is going to be the one that's most in danger because there's already a level of exposure there, and the process has already begun, and it's already fairly isolative, and when I say the process has begun, they're already in that position to start supplying them with their alleged needs and wants. They're able to, get over on them more easily because they can supply them with drugs. And then from there, the process is really generally already complete. In that priming phase, where there's been no real contact yet, it can be discovered. The person can wise up, or if it's not going the way they want to, why spend a lot of time on a difficult target when there's so many easier ones out there?
Yeah, and I like what you said, Russ, because again, I'm kind of drawn back into the prison system, but like the less obstacles, the better. I do agree. If the person's already a runaway, there's less obstacles in the way for that groomer to have to deal with. Where if the child is home and they're trying to manufacture the runaway, then obviously there's so many opportunities for the family to get involved. But the funny thing is, it's all psychological too. I think if you look at long-term damage, the grooming on the long term for someone who is pushed into running away may require a shift in that individual's mindset. And now the problem is, if the parents do discover it, or law enforcement, whatever it is, they have to try to fight through the feelings that this groomer put into the child. The child may actually believe that, without even knowing what love is in context, they may actually believe that they're in love. And now the grooming really sets place, because now the child will become very protective of the person that's grooming them. So again, grooming it's a manipulative game, but it affects the mindset of the individual to the point where the individual gets confused. And now it's a matter of, how do I break through that obstacle, that mindset, to get to my child? Because now my child is in love, and that superficial love, however they define it, but that love is controlling. So at any moment, the moment your eyes are not on this child, this predator can come in and try to establish that reconnection. So that's why I know for some people that have runaways, that where the groomer has persisted a little bit more, and the child actually believes that there's some level of care or love there, they wind up getting professional help to speak to the child, to let the child understand what it is that individual is doing. Now we got the psychological hooks, kind of touched on this a little bit, but the psychology of grooming is terrifyingly sophisticated. Predators don't just exploit existing vulnerabilities, they create them. They study their targets. What does this child need emotionally? Validation, independence, belonging, protection. Then they become the exclusive source of that need, as we said before. The love and fear balance is crucial. A groomer will shower a child with affection, making them feel special and chosen, while simultaneously creating fear. So if you tell anyone, they won't understand. Your parents would blame you. I'm the only one who really cares about you. I say that's why he has that tattoo. I think that's a subtle level of control, because she has it too, or had it. If you leave me, you'll have nowhere to go. This creates trauma bonding. The child becomes psychologically dependent on their abuser for both comfort and survival. Look at that, guys. Comfort and survival. Now, for runaways, the psychological hooks are even more complex because survival is at stake. The groomer becomes a lifeline. I saved you from your terrible home life. You be on the streets without me. I'm protecting you. The child feels grateful to their exploiter. They defend them, kind of what I said, and they'll lie to police to protect them because they genuinely believe this person saved their life. It's like this ultimate level of obligation as well. So the most heartbreaking aspect, many victims never recognize it as abuse. They think they're in love. They think they chose this. Even years later, some struggle to reframe their experience as victimization because the psychological manipulation was so complete. Think about that real quick. Years later, it still affects them in how they view that individual. Now, Russ, why do so many grooming victims, especially runaways, feel genuine gratitude and loyalty towards their exploiter, even when outsiders clearly see the abuse?
So there's a number of aspects here. In some of it, we can attribute that to people being young, of a young mindset. Early on in life, a number of raging emotions, raging hormones, and a heightened sensitivity to everything that happens around them psychologically. And so I think that that's where a lot of that stems from, because as people progress and move from early adulthood into later adulthood, they tend to get a lot more of experience. They're able to start seeing things for what they are, without this heightened lens of emotion that affects everything. One thing just that's kind of a good thing to know, when you're dealing with a subset population for whatever reason, and I deal with this all the time, is to understand that when people are in this heightened emotional state, and everything is drama, the thing that goes out the window the first are logic and rationale. And if you're completely divorced from logic and rationale, and everything is about the emotion, then you're fighting with regards to the emotion, and you're not fighting based on reasons or facts. And this repeats itself through all types of different things. That's one of the things, when I'm teaching domestic violence courses. The anger scale is an important thing to know, because once a person starts getting beyond a certain point in their anger, there is no rational faculty that's working to do anything. It becomes all about emotion, and it's really as simple as that, in my opinion.
Yeah, and guys, when the game sets in and you do have to kind of deal with an individual that believes they have feelings for the groomer, remember, you have to understand what their perspective is of love, or how their feelings grow. Most of the time, it's going to be superficial. When you speak to the child's going to relate feelings to behaviors. Well, he does this for me, he does that for me. It really has nothing to do with who that person is. But now, obviously, if you push them into trying to explain more, you could accidentally hint that love is about who the person is, and then they could start to convince themselves that the behaviors that they're doing, which are grooming behaviors, relate who the person is. It's genuine. They're nice. Nice is superficial at best. Nice is performative. So with that said, you got to be very careful, but you have to understand how that person may feel, how the victim may feel towards that individual at their very immature level. And that's when I believe sometimes, because it is a mindset, you may need professional help in order for them to unravel all those different layers, and making sure that the person truly has a better understanding of what love really means. Because I'll tell you something right now, groomers, they take ownership of their victims, complete ownership, and that's physical and mental, but they do mental first. So when it comes to going ahead and challenging that child's, it's not even an idea anymore. It becomes a belief, and it becomes a lot harder to peel back those layers of belief. That's why it's good to have a professional help you with this. And that would have been great when she was running away to maybe have a professional talk to the child and say, hey, I seen you run away multiple times. Maybe we should discuss a little bit. What are you running away from? What are you running towards? So if my child, again, not to harp, but if my child was having constantly running away, I may seek help from a professional to try to figure out what in this structure we could do a bit better. And Russ, second question for this section: how do groomers use a child's basic human needs for love and safety as psychological weapons to maintain control?
Yeah, I think we've kind of, already covered that. It's about monopolizing and being the only source of those things, really.
Yeah, and guys, it gets that greater sense of obligation too. So, warning signs for parents and communities. So the warning signs of grooming are often subtle because predators are experts at staying under the radar. Remember, guys, I was talking to Joe Pangaro, and he said that runaways, I mean, obviously people still look for them, but they don't become as urgent or as high risk as a abduction, because an abduction is someone that takes somebody without their willingness, and then they believe through statistics and studies that an abductor is going to put your child in danger immediately, as opposed to someone who's run away. But having said that, I'm still trying to let people know that grooming is also a form of mental abduction. So the warning signs of grooming are often subtle because predators are experts at staying under the radar. They know parents are watching for obvious red flags, so they've adapted. Instead of dramatic behavioral changes, look for gradual shifts. A child who becomes secretive about their phone, mentions new older friends, receives unexplained gifts, or starts using language that seems mature or coached. But grooming linked runaway signs are different and often missed entirely. Parents see typical teenage rebellion. I hate it here. You don't understand me. I want to leave, without recognizing these might be planted ideas from a manipulator. That's why I want this brought to the forefront, just for that. Because when they look at a runaway, the first thing they look at is the home. And I get it, but they need to look at, where is this child running to? Who's making this child think this way if there are no problems at the home? A child might start having relationship problems with family members that didn't exist before, or suddenly become convinced that their home life is abusive or unfair when outside observers see a normal family dynamic. That's the key. The most critical warning sign that's almost universally missed: when a child has a secret online relationship with someone who consistently validates their negative feelings about family while positioning themselves as the understanding alternative. Comments like, your parents don't deserve you, you're too good for this place, you belong somewhere that appreciates you, should trigger immediate alarm bells. Remember, guys, this is where they're extremely vulnerable, and the groomer knows that. Communities often fail because they don't connect the dots between grooming and running away. They see a rebellious teen who left home, not a manipulated child who was psychologically coerced into leaving by a predator who spent months preparing them for their exact decision. Because even today, right now, when we're looking at the David case, everybody now is looking at the dynamic of the home. And I'm not saying it's not important, but it's like everything shifts. It's now the dynamic of the home that's at fault for having to run away. And there goes David. Now he's no longer to blame. So, Russ, two questions here is, what are the subtle warning signs that distinguish normal teenage rebellion from a child being groomed to run away?
Oh, I mean, I think that's there's a spectrum there that's huge. I would say the fact, if it appears that the targeted individual is becoming isolated, and you may not see that because it may just seem like the problems are getting more and more deeply embedded. But when the answer to those problems, is revolved around by this one specific individual who's made contact, I think that's the key to know about identifying the fact that that's actually going on. Is something that parents have to be aware of. That making it harder for your kid to become a target, I think, is what's actually ideal, because then they go on, as I said before, to other targets. So restricting contact, making sure that that your loved one does not feel isolated, that their needs are taken care of, and their wants are discussed, because wants are something that is not necessarily good for them. That's where all this that's where all of this really stems from. Is key to doing that. And if your gut tells you that something's off, investigate it.
Russ, I love what you said about the wants being discussed, because it's good to understand where those wants originate. Obviously teenagers believe they need freedom right away. They want to go to a concert, let's say for an example, and you tell them no because of the concerns, and maybe they are a big fan. I mean, it'd be hard to believe that they want to go to a concert to see the singer who may be having a relationship with them. But it does make sense to try to understand what their wants are. Are these wants that usually relate to a teenager's want for freedom, which a lot of them are going to have, or is it connected to a bigger picture that showcases that what they're looking for is something that a child at that age really should have no idea of to some level? And Russ, why do communities and even law enforcement often miss the connection between grooming and runaway episodes, treating them as separate issues instead of cause and effect?
I don't know that that's necessarily true. I think that law enforcement is well aware that someone has been making contact, and that's often the genesis of a runaway episode. But law enforcement has limited resources. There's certainly certain things that they can do, but there's a limited number of officers, there's a limited number of resources, and there's only there's only X, Y, and Z that they can do under certain circumstances. I don't think that law enforcement is naive about what's going on. I think that the kind of actually the reflex thing is well, the person has disappeared, has a history of disappearing, and we know that she's with her boyfriend somewhere because that's where she's been before. And I'm not trying to victim blame or shame or anything like that, but it's a cold hard reality. And so I don't think that there is that naivety with regards to law enforcement.
Yeah, and by the way, if the police do come to your house, you have to report the child missing or running away, because that's the key. Is the child missing, the child run away? Usually the parents, they may say the child's missing, and then it could be understood that through dialogue that the child could have ran away. Why? Well, if you look at, I have access to all her accounts, and it looks like she's connected to this individual. Or when you call a friend of hers, a friend may tell you a little bit more information that you may not be aware of. But as I said, it's just a matter of the urgency. Like Russ mentioned, well, she's ran away a couple of times before. She's probably done it again, and that's the problem too. The fact when children keep on running away and they keep on coming back, it does lessen the urgency, at least mentally, because you figure, well, the kid's done this before, most likely they'll come back. And it's like the boy that cries wolf. And then until the one day they don't come back. So it's like you have to treat each runaway as if it's their first time, as if it's not normal behavior for them, because at one moment they are going to run away and not come back. So I think me and Russ see that all the time when you have people that make false allegations on things like I've been raped, and they haven't been raped because they're looking to try to manipulate something. And as much as you have to treat each allegation as if it could be true, the credibility of the person weakens. So now the problem is that we feel a little bit of erosion towards that. So if law enforcement comes in and sees that this child has a history of running away, I'm sure they treat it, as best they can. But, I'm sure in the back of their mind, like, this kid ran away like 7 times already. Most likely this kid's going to, make it back home until they don't. And then Russ, why do communities next part. Sorry. I have 2 more sections, Russ, and we're done. Legal and cultural implications. So prosecuting grooming is incredibly complex, especially when it intersects with runaway cases. Defense attorneys exploit the fact that many victims initially went willingly, made their own decisions, or even defended their abuser. Proving psychological manipulation requires understanding the subtle long-term process of control which is difficult to demonstrate in a courtroom focused on concrete evidence and specific acts. Our culture has normalized problematic age gap relationships, especially when they involve celebrities, influencers, or successful older partners. We see 19-year-olds dating 16-year-olds and call it romance. We see powerful adults in relationships with teenage fans and focus on the relationship rather than the inherent power imbalance and potential for exploitation. But the biggest legal failure is how we treat runaway victims of grooming. The system often criminalizes them as delinquents or problem children instead of recognizing them as victims or sophisticated psychological manipulation. A 14-year-old who is groomed into running away gets labeled as a runaway rather than a trafficking victim, even when the manipulation tactics are identical. The legal blind spot means many grooming cases are never properly investigated because law enforcement sees a voluntary runaway rather than a crime victim. The predator's greatest success is convincing everyone, including the victim, that the child made free choices when those choices were actually the result of calculated psychological manipulation. Two questions here, Russ. Why does our legal system struggle to recognize and prosecute cases where grooming led directly to a child running away, even when the manipulation tactics are clear?
It comes down to what our legal standard is, which is reasonable doubt. And so, what are you going to do? You're going to put a victim witness on the stand who's going to lie. And I think that people don't want to hear that.
That's powerful, Russ.
But what you just said, what it is.
Can you explore that? That was powerful, Russ. About, you're right, putting the victim who's going to lie.
Yeah, you put a victim witness on the stand who's going to lie in order to save the person that they're ostensibly in love or were in love with. It's not going to carry any weight, and you're not going to get anywhere with regards to that. And once again, I know people aren't going to like this, but what is the sense in squandering resources on that? You're better off if you want to put some actual resources into giving the victim witness some kind of help with regards to becoming more mature, understanding what they're going through, and putting them in a position where they're no longer likely to expose themselves to the type of jeopardy that they were in, than you are going after a bunch of fruitless prosecutions. Now, that's not to say that I believe that all of those prosecutions are fruitless, but there is a level of them. Where that victim witness does not even see themselves as a victim, even though they are. And once again, in a perfect world, where we had perfect laws and perfect people, we wouldn't be doing this anyway. So I think that there has to be a level of pragmatism that they're willing to accept. Is that level where it is now? Okay, I would say probably not. And we're in a constant struggle to try and change and upgrade and make things better. But still, there at some point there is a level of efforts with diminishing return, and that's just the nature of being human.
Yeah, and guys, I want to mention something too with predators. They do put themselves in a position of trust because, again, if there are any obstacles, they want people to second guess the fact that why would an influencer, why would a celebrity of this magnitude have interest in my daughter? Now, granted, obviously, this relationship has been exposed through many different resources, including the online sleuths, as we call ourselves, I guess, that showcased interactions with him that could have been a bit inappropriate, especially because of the age. But we see it in our profession, a priest, a teacher, a coach, people of position that of some level of position of authority connected to trust that makes the family kind of second guess it, because one is, well, why would they do it? They're a teacher. You're not even focused on the person. It's why would they do it? They're a teacher. You're focused more on the position, but then also you allowed to some level for your child to be harmed mentally. You think that because Well, I brought them to that school every day, or I brought them to that coach. And when you have a runaway or a juvenile delinquent, it makes it that much easier, because if you look at the credibility on a scale, where do you put a runaway and a delinquent? You're going to put the position of a teacher, and I'm not the person, but the position of a teacher, the position of a coach, the position of a celebrity at a higher level on a scale of trust than you would for a runaway or a delinquent. So for runaway or delinquent, like I know here's another level of control. If I was a manipulator and Russ was my target, which would be difficult, but let's just say I really had to work on the mental game on this one, because Russ would just throw me across the room. But a way I should have reversed it, been a lot more believable the other way. But if I went to Russ and I started playing that game, one of the things I would say, well, who the hell's going to believe you? Look at me. Look what I've done. I'm in this position. Who's going to believe you? So even if that person wants to turn and report something, there could be the threat of control where your word won't mean nothing compared to who I am. So that's the person. Grooming also at some level puts the person to some level of hopelessness, because if I can trap you and make you feel that all your efforts will serve no purpose, then you stop trying and you start accepting. Russ, the next part is last question for this section, then one more section. How has our culture's normalization of age gap relationships, and it is true, and power imbalances made it easier for groomers to operate without detection?
So I think I would take a little bit of, I don't believe that that's necessarily the case. I think that, we have pretty strong structures with regards to those things. There might be some outlier cases, where people, really tried to normalize that type of thing. But I think that overall people are like, yeah, that's not good. I think that people still have, that sense of morality about those things, saying, oh, he's 25 and she's 16, no bueno. So I don't think that that's necessarily the case. I think that there are levels of erosion within. Here's something else people won't like, within certain subcultures that appear across the country, and I don't think I'm going to go any deeper than that. But I think that people understand that when that's accepted within certain communities and stuff, it certainly can lead to a mindset where that acceptability may end up, actually, blowing a chance for successful prosecutions or interdictions, or other, treatment or intervention modalities. Let's just put it that way.
And guys, you do see this. The reason why I meant is you do see this in the limelight of Hollywood. Like I got a few here. Elvis Presley began courting Priscilla when she was 14. They married when she was 21. Jerry Lee Lewis married his 13-year-old cousin, Myra Gale Brown, in 1957. David Bowie accused of sexual encounters with teen girls in the 70s. One woman later came forward saying she was 14. Jimmy Page, or Led Zeppelin, allegedly had a secret relationship with Laurie Maddox, then 14, and convicted in 2021 of sex trafficking and racketeering involving underage girls. His R. Kelly, his marriage to Aaliyah when she was 15, was also part of the record. And then I got Roman Polanski pleaded guilty in 1977 to unlawful sex with a 13-year-old, fled the U.S. before sentenced and remains a fugitive. Woody Allen, not charged criminally, but accused by Dylan Farrow of abuse when she was a child. He denies that still. Other cases, Michael Jackson acquitted in 2005, trial on charges of child sexual abuse, but multiple accusers have since come forward. Remains one of the most polarizing cases in celebrity history. The reason why I'm mentioning this is, it's crazy because I have seen it where when they talk about these cases, they'll say, well, the child was obviously the family could have been benefiting from it, or it's okay, it's R. Kelly, and it's really not. And what I want people to realize is groomers are able to shift blame. I want people to realize that they're able to do things that make people think differently. Like, I mean, if I saw a 14-year-old girl married to a 30-year-old man right off the bat, I would think, wow, that's sickening. But when it becomes a celebrity, is it different? Did everybody accept the relationship with R. Kelly and Aaliyah at first, when technically that's no different here? She was underage. So I just wanted to put it in there because it's something that has happened, and then maybe we should revisit. And the last part I got, Russ, is education and protection strategy. So prevention requires completely reframing how we talk to kids about danger. Traditional stranger danger education is useless against grooming because groomers specifically work to not feel like strangers. We need to teach kids about manipulation tactics, psychological pressure, and the gradual erosion of boundaries. That's key. The gradual erosion of boundaries. They need to understand that predators are experts at making their victims feel special, chosen, and understood. Schools need mandatory education about digital manipulation, parasocial relationships, and the psychology of grooming. Kids need to learn that someone who constantly validates their negative feelings about family, encourages secrecy, or suggests they're mature enough for adult situations is using manipulation tactics, not showing genuine care. For runaway prevention, we need to teach kids that anyone who encourages them to leave a home, promises to take care of them, or suggests they'll be better off elsewhere is likely a predator, regardless of how much that person claims to love or understand them. Communities need rapid response systems that immediately assess runaway cases for grooming indicators. Every runaway should be evaluated for signs of psychological manipulation, not just physical abuse. We need to understand that a child who defends their decision to leave, refuses to cooperate with family reunification, or insists they're in love may actually be displaying symptoms of successful grooming. The most important shift: recognizing that grooming can be both the cause of running away and what happens after a child leaves home. Some kids are groomed into running away. Others are groomed after they're already vulnerable on the streets. Both scenarios require different intervention strategies. Last two questions, Russ. What would effective grooming prevention education actually look like? And how do we teach kids to recognize manipulation without making them paranoid about every adult relationship?
So I think that it's really more important to get the information into the hands of the parents, because I for one have a great deal of concern about governmental intervention in loco parentis, meaning taking the place of the parents. I think that the parents should be the ones given the information, because ultimately they're the ones responsible. Ultimately, they should know their child better than the government does, and they know the situations that their son or daughter is more likely to encounter. And so, and I think that, often what we see today is there's a real demonization of parents in order for the government to come in and do what it wants. So I'm very reticent to, just, hey, put this in the hands of teachers and things like that and let them go hog wild. Definitely not in favor of that. What I am in favor of is, you know, um, basically spooling up parents in a way that they can understand what's going on, because they're more likely to detect it, in my opinion. So I think that that's where it has to lie. But I would like to see some good media sources put together, information on how this works, because sometimes people just don't understand the different dynamics, such as earlier, when I brought up, the constant feed trough of confirmation bias, and how that works. So anyway, that's my 2 cents worth.
Yeah, I definitely believe that there should be a partnership with the education system and the parents, only because, and this is where my argument comes in, is that the teachers are the center of what's happening in the kids' world because they're exposed to it. They're in the schools. They hear the chatter. No different than us in corrections. How we're a valuable resource for understanding the criminal mind because we work amongst it. The teachers are probably going to understand trends. They're going to understand a lot of things because they live and work and breathe in this environment. So they're going to know what are the latest things that could pose as threats. And, I think a good working relationship between the parents and the education system, it does prove to be beneficial because they'll be aware of things that most parents may not even heard of because, again, it's something that's said at school that they could overhear that may not be openly said at home. And when we talked about effective grooming, I just want to make sure I really do think that the stranger danger thing should be a little bit more advanced as well, because again, it's not just so much about someone that doesn't know you coming up to you and saying, "Hey, come in my vehicle. I got a dog, or I got some candy for you," and then saying no at an absolute level, because that's pretty absolute, right? I don't know you, say no. That technically in today's world, grooming can happen behind the scenes online. So most likely these kids are being approached by people that they do know to some extent, or that they feel they know. And we have to be able to identify ways to counteract that, to be that influence in the dark, because that's what it is. How do you create such a powerful influence when you may not be there to see what they're doing? Because that's the impact, that's the impression. So I think in today's world, it's about trying to create an impact that they could take with them that controls their interactions that are trying to be secretive. That's the key, because again, you only could kids right now with all use of tech or whatever, they could be extremely secret in many different ways, and you're not really going to be in the know. So it's good to kind of get an understanding of how they operate that way and to create an impact so they can govern themselves a bit better. And I think that is a partnership effort. And then I have Russ, if you can implement one systematic change to better protect kids from grooming related runaway situations, what would have the biggest impact on saving lives?
I think that it's about communication, and specifically mindful communication. As a parent, if you really want to do the best job possible, be mindful about your communication with the kids and really get them into the habit of giving you information about what it is that they're doing, and really put them into a position where that information can flow, backwards and forwards. Because when you do that, you're more likely to detect than if you just have a lot of surface conversations. And I know it's hard with teenagers, but you have to be able to go there in a deeper, more meaningful way. So practice that. If I was going to say one thing to parents, take a class on motivational interviewing. And if you take a class on motivational interviewing, you will do such a better job with regards to that it would truly make the difference.
I may say this a little bit general, but I noticed this with my daughter a little bit. She's going to be 13 soon. If you get too aggressive with attacking their want for freedom, that could be the very thing that pushes them away. So I think they have to kind of see, and this is very general, but maybe something that could be spawned. Maybe there's an idea here that you can get something to. You have to show that you're working in partnership for their freedom. That, we're not standing on absolutes, but we're standing on building credibility and trust. So by allowing certain things so they can gradually go into being that adult. And I think that's extremely a good approach. And I do think, at this age, kids are going to have a back and forth with their parents anyway, because they're trying to identify themselves by breaking away from some parental influence and then maybe trying to see who they are. Maybe the biggest influence can come from their peers. So it's good to understand that process, but try to do it in a way where it's respectful to what they're going through. And they understand that it's in a partnership to create freedom, not an absolute no to deny it. Okay, so the last parts I have here, Russ, we're done, is some takeaways. 3 groomings. We talked about runaway scenarios. So you got the groom to run. So predators manipulate children into leaving homes. You also have predators that groom them after running, vulnerable runaways targeted by opportunistic predators, or you have groomers while they're running. Child in unstable situations systematically manipulated. What's the critical message here? Grooming and running away aren't separate issues. They're often part of the same predatory strategy. Understanding this connection is crucial for prevention, intervention, and prosecution. And I think we covered this, and I think we leaned on the David case to strengthen our argument, because it is something that should be in the forefront. So why not borrow from the trend and do something a little bit more meaningful, as opposed to jumping with every little possible connection that really is irrelevant? Why not take advantage of maybe a good, strong public service announcement? Hey, Russ, anything you'd like to say in closing? I enjoyed this, and thank you for taking your time coming on.
No, you bet. No, I think that it all really does come down to mindfulness, in my opinion. Constantly be thinking about what it is your kids are doing, what they're saying, and be mindful about your interactions with them, and seek deeper understandings, and do not leave it to the alleged professionals. I have a deep mistrust of things that go on within the government, having been a government employee for so long. So do not leave it to the teachers. Take that upon your own shoulders.
I love that, Russ. And guys, again, as we're covering these stories, there are certain updates that we run with, but in the process right now, people run with so many things, they create more confusion. So I think there should be times where we could sit back, recollect on what we got, and then see what lessons can be learned here and could be applied. So deaths don't happen in vain, something like this. As always, guys, the show is tipped. If you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify every time I post a video. Stay safe.